It's going to be an interesting week for the locals because the Giants head out to see Cleveland and the Jets to Green Bay with the LaFleur brothers on the same practice field. So it will be interesting to see as joint practices could start to overtake preseason games in some respects in terms of evaluation. And certainly in the early evaluation for the Giants, who did not play a lot of their principals against the Jets, and certainly for the Jets who want to see more from their folks against some competition. Want to see, can Mekhi Becton hold up on that left side like the player they thought that they drafted? Can Carl Lawson continue to wreak havoc as he has on Becton and the Jets on the practice field? So we're getting into much more interesting times in the NFL as training camp continues.
So how is this going to work now? Because we used to have 4 preseason games, and you kind of know, okay, nobody's going to play in 1. Maybe the starters play a little bit in 2, and then 3 is not a full go, but as close to a full go as you have, and then 4 is irrelevant.
No one again, right.
Right, so now with only 3, and 1 is still apparently the no-go. Nobody cares about that. I mean, are we going to have week 2 in preseason be the full go or the near full go? How are we working that?
Well, and different teams are different, right? Like Robert Saleh did play Zach Wilson, and for the most part, that starting offense, Corey Davis was on the field. Keelan Cole was on the field. Denzel Mims on the field. And I know that Denzel right now is not a starter, but I certainly would anticipate him being on that roster. So, and also the offensive line, to some degree, whereas the Giants didn't play any of those folks. The line had to play. You don't have enough depth on these training camp rosters to rest an entire offensive line in the first game. So they played, but Daniel Jones did not. Obviously, Saquon not ready to play and did not play. Both of those make sense at this point. So, and you did not see Sterling Shepard. You did not see a lot of those players. Darius Slayton was probably the biggest receiver out there for the Giants against the Jets. So the different teams are taking a different approach, which I do think makes it harder to evaluate what we actually saw, right? Zach Wilson certainly looked good and good enough for a player making his first debut in any kind of a game against outside competition. But it's hard to judge when the coaches are treating these games so differently. Joe Judge saying he was going to treat the first game like the traditional fourth game when no one plays, and he essentially did that.
Right. So now I don't know what to expect moving forward. I don't know how to properly evaluate it. And it's, not many people put much stock in preseason. I always use this as an example. I'm curious if you remember. In 2008, Falcons... Remember, it was Flacco and Ryan's rookie year, right? And this was before rookie quarterbacks started having immediate success.
Right.
And I remember, I was producing at the time for Mike, and I remember we were doing something on air, and I was saying, I think the Falcons are going to be good because of what I watched in the preseason. Ryan looked good to me, looked like he belonged. I could see that their receivers were as good as I remember seeing in Atlanta. And that was the year, if you remember, they were expected to do nothing because they had a rookie head coach with Mike Smith, a rookie quarterback with Matt Ryan. Vic had just gone in prison. The franchise was in ruins. And yet they did go 10-6. So I took a lot from that preseason. Ever since then, I started to pay a little more attention to preseason, saying maybe you can learn a little bit. But now, who the hell knows? And by the way, it's all, not that you're going to be, Zach Wilson's going to be Aaron Rodgers because he was 6 for 6 in preseason game 1. I think we got to stop the over-evaluation of rookie quarterbacks in particular from week to week, preseason, even year 1, regular season. You got to let it kind of play out a little bit. But overall, Kim, trying to figure out what a team is going into the year now, who the hell knows? You're seeing none of these guys play in week 1. All right, maybe some teams use some of their play. Are they going to play their regulars in week 2? What about the opponents? What about week 3? What's that going to look like as we head into a different era of the National Football League?
I can go back to 2001, which was my first full year at the Star-Ledger covering the Giants. And they were having joint practices with the Patriots. And I can't remember where the joint practices were. That was back when the Giants still went to Albany. I feel like we left Albany for the practices. I could be wrong about that part. But I remember as a group, the Giants beat writers were shaking their heads. Oh my God, the Patriots are awful. What a terrible football team. They won the Super Bowl that year. Right. So I think I learned early on in that case, the idea, a lot can change after preseason ends, and preseason may or may not tell you certainly a full story about a team. But I think that you look at the Giants and the Jets, they have clearly different goals this season. Dave Gettleman and John Mara in particular, John, of course, his voice more important, wants this to be a playoff team and is not, no mandate, but he talked to reporters this morning, and the essential idea is win more games and make the playoffs. We'll see if the Giants are good enough to make that happen, particularly along their offensive line. And at quarterback, we're going to find out, because the defense is pretty darn good.
But if they don't, then what?
It doesn't sound like there's a then what.
Well, because Joe Judge isn't going anywhere.
No, understood. That's what I mean. It doesn't sound like there's
you think Gettleman still survives it?
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like John's of a mindset, to make a move there, even if playoffs aren't in the cards for this team. Whereas the New York Jets are very much in a building year under Robert Saleh, where they will embrace and look for any and all reasons to say we're on the right track, right? Which does make sense with that roster and with that quarterback and with obviously a new coach in place. So, it's both of these teams I think could be intriguing, and I think they both in some ways can overachieve. It's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out after we watched a preseason game that didn't mean very much and that didn't tell us very much.
Yeah, I mean, I only watched I was out Saturday night, so I'm not sitting there locked in.
Right.
Although I would like to, and I DVR'd, I watched the Wilson highlights, which is the one thing you want to take from that. And I'll be curious now, watch it in week 2 and 3 and see, who's playing and try to evaluate that maybe going into the year. Because I do think some things carry over, whether it's the offensive line. Yep. If the offensive line, Kim, is struggling for the Giants, let's say, in the 2 games in the preseason, and they have their guys, or they're trying to find the group that they want to go with, and it's struggling in the preseason, why wouldn't I think that would carry over? And it also, we've seen this too in the last several years now with the NFL, where weeks 1 and week 2 in the NFL, they're still trying to figure out what they are. And we are still in the process. They're still evaluating and trying to figure out what they are. Well, so are we. It's different than in years past where they'd be ready for week 1, hit the ground running. Now it's almost like weeks 1 and 2, there's sloppy football being played all across the league, and you're still trying to figure out, what these teams are. But I do think the Giants' offensive line is certainly one thing to look for. And with the Jets, I think they'll be, look, how could they not be more excited than they were last year? I mean, they've been dreadful for a couple of years under Adam Gase. The problem is their division. And even if you think the Jets are good, even if you paint the best case scenario, Mosley comes back, he's going to be a stud. Lawson, pass rusher, defensive line, they should be good. All right, maybe they could cover a little bit. And the offense should be much better. Even with the rookie quarterback, they should be able to run behind that left side of the line. How good can they be in that division?
Well, and they could show signs of great progress and win one division game.
Right. Exactly.
Because they're likely not going to beat Buffalo. They're likely not going to beat New England. Maybe they split with Miami. And that is a very real scenario, like you just said, that could play out in a year where they show great progress.
Right.
Conceivably, that's how it could play out. As for the New York Giants, I do think that the offensive line has to be better, period.
You think it will or no?
I think the jury is still out there.
And they're still trying to figure out what mix they're going to go with?
I think they mostly know who they're going to, the personnel. And there could be changes. And the one thing we've seen under Joe Judge, he does sub offensive linemen much more than many coaches you'll ever see, and any coach I've ever seen. Usually the starting five's the starting five.
You want continuity there.
Yeah, and he does like a little bit more of a rotation or that kind of thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is different. But if the offensive line to me has to be fixed, because Dave Gettleman's been promising that since he took over, which was after the 2017 season.
Yeah, maybe at some point.
And at some point you have to have that. You have to fix what you were brought on board to fix.
And especially when you take a running back number 2, which I said at the time, I don't care if it's Jim Brown, you don't do that, especially where the Giants were as a franchise. But if that's going to be your bread and butter pick with Saquon Barkley, and that is, I don't care who the running back is, you need to give him a good offensive line. That will be the key. All the pieces are in place. If the offensive line can hold up, then we'll find out what Daniel Jones is made of. If it doesn't hold up, then I don't care who the quarterback is, who the running backs are, or who the wide receivers are. You're not going to do a lot. Now, I do think Joe Judge is smart enough as a coach to maybe overcome some of the weaknesses.
Some of it.
There's ways you could coach around that a little bit and hide it.
Some of it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, some of it you can. Saquon's never had a good offensive line. When he was at Penn State, they were still coming off those sanctions, the NCAA sanctions, to where, I've had this conversation with James Franklin. The offensive line back then was the last of the piece of that puzzle to come back, just with scholarship issues and I guess to some degree the priority Penn State had to put on its recruiting. The offensive line just wasn't great for Saquon, and he's never had a great offensive line. He could certainly benefit from that coming off this ACL plus injury that he's coming back from. And we also hope to see him, obviously, in the season opener. We need to take a break. We need to take a break because Dove is nodding at me. And I actually kind of sort of saw the break sign. It actually came from Sal. So we went from Dove to Sal to
like
me. We have to take a break.
He's relaying the signs from the sideline.
Right. That's right. There are signs. It's like a college football game with the cue cards.
Exactly.
You see the Smurfs and you see the cupcakes on the side. That's what we're doing with Dove. All right.